Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine being handed a beautifully bound book. It's got a leather cover, gold edges, and your family name embossed right on the front. Everyone around you treats this book like it's sacred. They quote from it at holidays. They pass it down with reverence. They cry when a page is lost. But when you try to open it, the language is unfamiliar. The script looks ancient. Half the pages are missing, or worse, deliberately torn out. You read a sentence, but it doesn't resonate. You flip further and find a story about sacrifice, migration, resilience. It's epic, sure, but it feels like someone else's epic. Not yours. You close the book, left with a quiet, knowing question no one dares to ask out loud. What if I don't belong in my own ancestry? This isn't alienation, this isn't rejection. This is dissonance, the raw, unspoken ache of millions who look in the mirror and see features they can't trace. Hear a surname they can't pronounce, celebrate traditions they don't understand, and wonder, who am I really? Let's be brutally honest, we live in a world that worships roots. Genealogy apps are booming. DNA kits promise to deliver your identity in a vial. Social media is flooded with posts about heritage, ancestral altars, and folk costumes worn like crowns. And if you don't feel that pull, if you don't tear up at the sound of a folk song, if you can't cook your grandmother's dish from memory, if you hesitate when someone asks, "Where are you really from?" you're met with a look, a pause, a gentle, pitying, "Oh," as if you're spiritually malnourished, as if you've lost something priceless and don't even know it. But what if you never had it to begin with? The raw truth is, feeling disconnected from your cultural heritage isn't a failure. It's often the direct result of forces far larger than you. Colonization, forced assimilation, migration trauma, generational silence, and systemic erasure. You didn't abandon your culture. It was taken from you, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, but always systematically. And no amount of Instagram aesthetics or weekend workshops can rebuild a bridge when the river has changed course entirely. Take Liam, for example. His last name ends in EZ. At school, teachers assumed he was Latino and asked if he spoke Spanish. He didn't. At home, his father, a quiet man who worked double shifts, never spoke of the homeland. When Liam once asked about their family's origin, his father just stirred his coffee and said, "We're American now." That's enough. It wasn't hostility. It was protection. Liam would later learn from an offhand comment that his grandfather had fled political violence as a teenager. He burned his documents, changed his name at the border, and swore his children would never carry the burden of memory. Trauma in that family wasn't spoken. It was sealed. So Liam grew up fluent in American pop culture, but mute in the language of his bloodline. He learned to nod politely when cousins sang songs in a tongue he couldn't place. He didn't resent it. He mourned it, a grief without a name, a homesickness for a home he'd never seen. This is the silent epidemic no one diagnoses, cultural orphanhood. Not orphaned by death, but by disruption. When your ancestors were forced to abandon rituals to survive. When your great-grandmother was punished for speaking her mother tongue in a boarding school. When your family migrated for safety and quietly buried their old ways beneath layers of fitting in. When the only thing passed down was silence. Neuroscience even reveals that cultural disconnection registers in the brain like physical pain. That hollow feeling you get isn't metaphorical. It's physiological. Your nervous system is literally registering a rupture in your sense of self. But here is what wellness influencers won't tell you. You cannot heal disconnection by performing a culture you do and feel. Buying a traditional outfit for a photo shoot or memorizing a few phrases for a family gathering isn't reconnection. It's cosplay. And beneath the filter, the emptiness just grows. Heritage isn't a costume, it's a living continuum. And when that chain is broken, you can't just splice the ends back together. You have to reweave. And that reweaving starts not with celebration, but with excavation. Anthropologists discovered that the most profound cultural ruptures often happen in the second generation. The first generation carries the wound and the memory. They know what was lost. The second generation inherits only the silence. They grow up in a home where the past is a closed door, where questions are deflected. They don't just lack heritage. They lack the framework to even ask for it. Think of Amina, born in London to Somali parents. She spoke perfect English, debated post-colonial theory at university, but felt like an imposter every Eid. She knew the prayers by rote but didn't understand the words. Her mother would say, "Just say it. The meaning is in the doing." But for Amina, the doing felt hollow. It wasn't until she found a faded cassette tape of oral poetry, sung in an ancient dialect, that something shifted. The voice on the tape cracked with raw, unfiltered emotion. It was a lament, but also a defiant anthem of survival. Amina spent months with a linguist, translating the poem. She uncovered a key, a lineage of women who used song to encode resistance and smuggle history past censors. That tape didn't just give her back her culture. It gave her permission to build her own. And that's the radical truth. Connection to heritage isn't about returning to the past. It's about co-authoring the future with your ancestors as collaborators, not dictators. Your cultural heritage isn't a museum exhibit behind glass. It's a library, and some shelves are dusty, some books are damaged. But you aren't just a visitor, you're a librarian. You get to decide what gets restored, what gets reinterpreted, and what new chapters get written by you. This is where the guilt creeps in. I should know this. My ancestors suffered so I could remember, and I forgot. If I don't reclaim it, it dies with me. Stop. That guilt is the echo of colonial logic. The idea that culture is a finite resource. But culture isn't a fossil, it's a river. It bends, it floods, and it carves new paths. Consider the Maori of New Zealand. After decades of forced assimilation, their language was on the brink of extinction. Their response wasn't nostalgia. It was reinvention. They created language nests, where elders and toddlers learned together. They made Maori rap and developed apps. They didn't try to resurrect the past. They birthed a future culture, anchored in values, not just vocabulary. That's the model. Continuity with creativity. Maybe you've taken a DNA test and just felt like you were staring at data. Maybe you've visited your ancestral village and felt like a tourist. Maybe you've whispered at your grandfather's grave, "I wish I knew you." That ache is sacred. It proves you haven't given up on belonging. The raw truth is, people who don't feel connected to their heritage aren't lost. They're listening. They're saying, "My worth isn't tied to how well I replicate the past." Psychologists call this identity. Sovereignty, the right to define yourself on your own terms. Imagine two trees. One clings fiercely to its original form and snaps in a storm. The other adapts, its roots seeking new water, its branches twisting in response. When the storm hits, it bends, but it stands. In the spring, it blooms with flowers no one in its lineage has ever seen. Which tree honors the root more? The one that replicates or the one that evolves? That's you. You're not a broken branch. You are the new growth. And the most courageous thing you can do is stop apologizing for it. Stop saying, "I wish I knew more," and start saying, "I'm learning my own way." Stop asking, "Am I enough?" And start declaring, "My search is my heritage." Because for some of us, heritage isn't what was given. It's what we build from the fragments we find, so what now? First, stop chasing authenticity. Start cultivating resonance. Ask, does this feel true in my body? Does it align with my values? If yes, it's yours. Second, seek the why, not just the what. Understand the core value behind a tradition, and you can express it in modern forms. A parable about greed becomes a podcast on economic justice. A harvest ritual becomes a community garden. Third, find your fellow seekers. The ones who say, "I'm making it up as I go too." Connection is forged in shared vulnerability. If this is resonating with you, if you felt this loneliness, know this: you are not a cultural failure. You are a cultural innovator. The next phase of your lineage begins with your questions. Which brings us to what's next. In our next deep dive, we'll follow unforgettable journeys of people rewriting their family histories and healing generational trauma. We'll see how a Black woman in Alabama used land deeds to uncover stories of resistance, how a Ukrainian refugee in Canada created a digital archive of elders' memories, and how a third-generation Chinese-Mexican man turned his grandfather's story into a graphic novel. These aren't academic projects. They are acts of radical hope. They prove you don't need a full archive to begin. You just need one thread and the courage to pull it. So if this stirred something in you, smash that like button as a signal flare to others in the dark. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the stories coming next are blueprints for rebuilding identity from the ground up. The raw truth, You don't have to arrive at your heritage, you just have to begin. Your ancestors didn't survive so you could replicate their pain. They survived so you could reimagine their joy. The book isn't closed. It's waiting for your chapter. And it's going to be unlike anything that came before. The future of culture is in the hands of those brave enough to rekindle the flame with new fuel. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, stay tender, and stay stubbornly, unapologetically yours.